Have you ever felt that whisper in your soul calling you to something more, but all the things spinning around in your mind have kept you stuck? Well, what if I told you that choosing excellence could be both easier and more adventurous than you could ever imagine? I am Chelsea DeBruin-Colbert, your host of All Things Excellence. I'm a soul catalyst for excellence who leapt off that corporate cliff and left small town Iowa farm life in my 20s to follow my calling, helping women come home to themselves by anchoring into who they're designed to be. I create sacred containers where women rediscover their truth, design their dream life, and transform those whispers into action. Now you can find me running my business from the soccer sidelines as a coach's wife, hiking my favorite Arizona mountain, or back in Iowa with my family, or on an adventure chasing my next sunrise, hot cup of coffee and journal in hand. Through intimate conversations about the stories, the traumas, and the transformations behind choosing excellence, we're creating a collective healing journey together. I believe in diving deep into personality designs, experimenting boldly, and learning life's greatest lessons through our beautiful chaos. Every week, my guests and I are going to rip down the curtains so you can see behind the scenes of real transformation as we explore what excellence actually looks like. Not just the highlight reel, but that messy middle where the magic happens. Whether you're seeking inspiration to take that leap or already on your journey and craving connection, this is your invitation to join us. So grab your coffee, settle in, and get ready to discover just how close you are to the life your soul is calling you to create. This is All Things Excellence. Hey, All Things Excellence fam, welcome back. We can label today the episode that is a million times harder than I ever anticipated. Today I'm going to talk about, originally it was the top 10 books that shaped me. But if you know anything about me at all, I am this insane, voracious reader. I always have been. As a kid, I don't know how young I started reading chapter books, but it was very young. And I would check out as many as I possibly could from the church library and the school library all at once. I usually would read a pretty thick chapter book a day. In 7th grade, there was some chart where we were tracking. If you read books, you got points and you got prizes. And I broke the chart. Hands down, broke the chart. Which, in all seriousness, y'all, I've talked about it before that I was bullied really bad by 2 girls in my class from like 2nd through 6th grade. And as an Enneagram 8, you go to that 5. So what am I doing? I'm just like shutting out the world, diving in, reading about all the things, absolutely losing myself in these books. Like, look at my coping mechanisms that I had. So what that did was it did create a really good habit of reading, of constantly diving in and just, pouring through book after book after book. So with that, I, created that really good habit. And I will tell you, through high school, I didn't really read as many books in high school. I was definitely obsessed with all of your murder mystery books. And then when I got into college, I did start getting a little bit more into leadership books. I grew up in a home where both of my parents were voracious readers of like the self-help leadership books, both of my parents, both of them being entrepreneurs. So I was definitely around those books. So then by the time I remember I had just moved to college, so I was 18 years old. I remember going into Barnes and Noble. I'd moved from my tiny little town in Iowa to the quote unquote city, right? I moved to Ankeny, which is like outside of Des Moines, Iowa. And I remember going to Barnes and Noble, and my friend was looking at my roommate, my friend. She was looking at, more of your entertainment, your, what is that called? Like fiction books. And I remember I wandered over to the self-help section, and I remember I bought my own personal very first self-help book. It was like not my parents, not one that anybody had bought for me, but it was my first. And that kind of started that. But when I think about, the books that shaped me, I looked back over really my career as an adult, like in my career being more of an entrepreneur. What are those books that absolutely shaped who I am today, shaped me as a leader, shaped me as a coach, as a mentor, and have really helped me to become who I am today. I will tell you that a longtime party trick that I've had is people will constantly, still, it's been happening for a really long time. People will reach out to me all the different ways and they'll tell me about this season that they're going through in life. And then they'll ask me what book they should read for that season. So that definitely has been a party trick that I've done for a long time. So I suppose if you want to book a clarity call, we can talk about a 30-minute clarity call. We can talk about what book you should be reading for this season. But I will tell you this, I've known that I was going to do this episode for about a week and a half. And I thought, oh, this is going to be the easiest episode that I ever do because I like, are you kidding me? Just talking about the books I love, the books that have shaped me. And I think it's one thing to have people reach out to you, tell you about the season that they're in their life, and you say, "Oh, this book that I read 15 years ago, totally recommend it. This is where I was. This is why you should read it." There's one thing to do that. It was a different thing for me to experience this last week and a half, diving back into these books in this way to really take myself back there on that journey to do this episode a really good, really do it justice. And so one thing to know about me as well is I think I've talked about this before, that I have a photographic memory, which means I forget nothing. And I relive life like a movie for the rest of my life. Like every pillar moment in my life is recorded and stored, and I can access it in the blink of an eye. And I don't just watch it, I have this full body experience about it. So I found myself getting really emotional and kind of avoidant once I made the decision that this is what I was going to talk about. And I had started to go to my bookshelves and pull out the books that were from core memory. So I didn't go to my bookshelf and look at my bookshelf and go, "Oh, which of these books really shaped me?" I sat down and from memory ran myself through, pretty much the last 15 years and popped out the movies in my head and the books that went along with them. So, yeah. Recently I even got rid of about over 100 books. I had hundreds of books and they're all self-help books. But recently I'd gotten rid of over 100 books. So most of them I do have physical copies of, but some of them it was like I just wanted to leave that season behind me, and I'd even physically gotten rid of those books. So, you guys, I wanted to give you guys 7 rules for reading. 7 rules for reading before we even dive into this. Rule number 1, you do not need to finish a book. Rule 2, make it your journal. Highlight it, dog ear it, just own it. I want your book to look absolutely tattered. The best thing you can ever do for an author is to send them a photo of their book basically destroyed because you've loved it so much. 3, never let anyone borrow your book. People will say, "Oh my gosh, you're reading that book. Can I borrow it?" And I'm like, hell no, you can't even look at it. Are you kidding me? Because there's probably notes about you in the book. Like when I read a book, I experience it fully and it actually becomes an appendage of me. Not only do I highlight it, I dog ear it, I have little plastic tabs that I tab it, but I write all through it like this experiential journey. Like the book is physically now a part of me, and no, you may not read the inside of my soul. Rule 4, write your page numbers and top takeaways at the front. This is something I'm not quite sure actually when I started doing this. We'll see. We'll figure out when I started doing this in these books. But there came this point where I noticed I was like dog earring so much, tabbing so much with like the plastic little highlight tabs that I started the really core takeaways. I started writing the page number and the core synopsis of this takeaway at the very front of the book. So I could pull these books back off the shelf, flip to literally just flip the cover open and see and like relive that experience of that book in case I needed a refresher. Rule 5, date it. Right? The moment that you order a book or you buy a book, you write the date in the front of it, you write the date that you read it, and then you always write the date that you reread it. I've always done it just I don't know why, I just did. And I can tell you now to sit here and go back through 15 years of these books and to realize the books that I read and then the seasons that followed. I experienced so much of God's goodness through this exercise that I've been doing with myself these last 10 days. Rule 6, you are allowed to have the physical and the audio. There are so many books that I have the physical book and I also have the Audible. I am not an Audible learner at all. Again, photographic memory, right? So I have to physically look at it. But sometimes I've found that if there's a book I really want to get through or I really want to experience it, like I read it and I want to keep reliving it, that I've got to also have it on Audible, so I can re-jog my memory a lot easier with it. I have that actually I have that with a lot of books. My favorite books, though, that I've done that I don't even know if I'll touch on this, but the You're a Badass at Making Money, and The Illusion of Money, those are three books that to me were more like mindset programming books, affirmation reading books. And so I read the books and then those are audibles. I'll randomly, if I'm just driving around or I'm doing really mindless work in my office, I'll put those books on Audible and have them reading. And rule number 7, books can collect dust for a decade and one day call out to you. So don't get after yourself if you've had this book. It's been sitting in your TBR pile, your to be read pile for a really long time. Books are allowed to sit there and collect dust for a decade. And then one day, it just becomes the day that you're supposed to read it. All right, let's get started. Book number 1. I'd read a lot of books at this point when I'd actually gotten this book. But this is the first book. This is the first book that when I think back and go, what is that very first leadership book that was that self-improvement, personal growth book that radically changed my life and was a huge shift for me. And there's no negotiating about this. It is John Maxwell's book called Failing Forward. And what this book did for me, I actually read it in a day. The reason I read it in a day, I was getting ready to go to a conference, and the guest speaker at this conference, she had worked for John Maxwell. And so I just felt like I wanted to make an impression on her, and that if she had personally worked for John Maxwell, that I needed to read one of his books. I had never read one of his books at this point. At this point, I was 24. I think I was 24 years old or something like that. And so I grabbed this book uh, from Barnes and Noble, y'all, because this was a long time ago. Grabbed the book, and I remember my house, the first house I ever bought. I bought it when I was like 23 or 24 years old. And I sat on my back patio for the whole day, and I read this book cover to cover. And it's not a big book, but y'all, it's not a small book. And this is the book that really helped me reframe how I viewed failure. And now I know so much more about myself, right? Like I know about myself that I'm this, in human design, I'm this 3-6 profile, which means I'm an experiential learner. My wisdom is always from experience, that, the learning is always in the doing. I have to try something before I know if it works. I have to leap, crash, burn, and learn. Like I just am a trial and trial and trial and trial and error again kind of person. And so it makes sense why this book really spoke to me and helped me reframe failing. That essentially, this book helped me realize that the faster I fall on my face, the faster I was going to be successful. And I was living in this constant place of analyzation, paralyzation, because I was so afraid to make the wrong decision, to do the wrong thing. And I think a lot of that comes from, I am that, like, I am the oldest child, oldest daughter, oldest niece on both sides, oldest granddaughter on both sides, like everything oldest girl that could possibly be. I am that person. And so that, there's memes and reels that talk about that make jokes about that for a reason, because it's a real thing. Like you just carry so much weight to feel like you have to be so much for everyone, and that everyone is really looking up to you, and everyone is looking at you because they quite literally are. And so you have a lot of worry about making the wrong move. My cousin Marnay and I, we've actually been talking a lot about this lately too, how we were just raised in a family where the expectations are high. And I think where most people, like let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, most people in the world expect like a 4 out of themselves. And, we were raised in a family that expects like a 12 out of a scale from 1 to 10. And us being who we are, we want to meet those expectations. So we push ourselves even harder. And this was that book that helped me take a breath and realize that it was never going to be perfect, and the only way to actually make progress was to fail forward. The second book is also a John Maxwell book. So it did kick off this, like, I'm super obsessed with John Maxwell era. I did end up buying like every single one of his books. I really quickly realized that he has about 5 books out of his 40 books, but they can really be all categorized into 5 books that are actually the same, that are shifted around a lot. And the second book that I grabbed, I read a lot of books again in between. And in this time, I had left my little hometown where I bought my home, and I moved an hour and a half away from little Oskaloosa to Des Moines. And it felt like a really, really big deal that I was doing that. Like, I already lived up there in college, but I'd moved back home and now I was moving. And it just felt like I was making this really big deal change in my life. And I started reading John Maxwell's 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And I was spending a lot of time at Barnes & Noble when I found this book. I was meeting a lot of friends at Barnes & Noble. And I will tell you, if you have not read John Maxwell's 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, you need to. Like, I don't tell a lot of people, like, I don't even want to hear it, you got to do this. But I'm telling y'all right now, if you have not read this book, you need to read this book, because this is growth 101 as a human. And I don't care how many other books you've read, you do need to go back and grab this book, because this book, as I went flipping through it, I mean, it is the heck is dog-eared out of this thing. I realized as I read through this, oh my, this is the foundation of everything I am. Like, if all these other books and the courses and the coaches and the therapists, like, if all of those other things are what built the house of who I am, this book is absolutely what laid the foundation. I'm going to tell y'all about the first 2 laws alone in it. The first one is the law of intentionality, living your life with intention and purpose. And the second one was the law of awareness, that you have to know yourself in order to grow yourself. And I remember reading this book, and in this season is when I was actually exposed to, so I'd been in therapy the majority of the time since I was 10 years old. I was like seeing a therapist or a counselor. So at this point, I've been seeing a therapist or a counselor for like 16 years. But this was the first time when I read this book that you got to know yourself to grow yourself. It made me realize that I needed to hire someone who was very specifically a mindset and business coach, not a career coach, not a college coach, not a therapist, but a business coach and a mindset coach. And so that's when I hired my very first one for that. And I had her for several years. I worked in group settings with her. I worked one-on-one with her. She's the one that taught me about writing a new truth statement. And y'all, as I was flipping through reading this book, it was, I mean, I think I just sat in here for hours and went, you gotta be kidding me. You've gotta be kidding me. Chapter 6 of this book is called The Law of Environment, and it talks about growth thrives in conducive surroundings. The first step towards success is taken when you refuse to be a captive of the environment you first find yourself in. And it talks about how you're a product of your environment. And if you're always at the head of the class, then you're in the wrong class, because the best place to learn is where others are always ahead of you. And y'all, I literally wrote the date. I do this a lot. I write the date when I read something, when it hits me hard. And the date that I read this chapter was November 28th, 2012. Now, what you don't know about that was 3 days later, I packed my car to the brim in Iowa, and I drove 12 hours south, and I stayed in Dallas for a week. The long story short of that is I'd had a really pivotal conversation with somebody from corporate for the company that I was a consultant for. And he had said, have you ever thought about moving? And I said, I just actually moved. And he said, you did? I said, I moved from Oskaloosa to Des Moines. And he was like, congratulations, you moved 90 90 minutes and now you have more of the exact same people. Like you didn't really leave your environment. You don't move 90 minutes and shift environments. And at the time I was like, oh, I was like actually really proud of myself. I thought I did a big thing here. And he was like, no, you did not. And so he talked to me about considering growing my business in 5 different geographic areas. He and I remember we were sitting, it was at a conference. It was a small conference. There was only like 400 or 500 of us. And he was the guest at the entire conference. And he had hand selected me out of the crowd and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your numbers. He walked me outside of the hotel. We walked down a little path. We sat on a bench and he had this conversation with me about if I had ever considered moving. And we wrote a list that day of all the places that I would consider moving. And the very top of the list that felt the easiest to me because I'd been there before was Dallas. And I had a friend that I could go down and I could stay with this friend for a week and I could work in Dallas to see what it was like. What I didn't know, I talked to him in the middle of October. Here I am, probably a month later. I read this chapter of this book, and 3 days later, I get in my car and I drive down there to be down there for a week to see what it would be like to work down there. And it was there that I met a really great friend. Her name is Carrie. She showed me all over. She made me feel like it was home. And next thing I know, I am sitting on the floor of a beautiful apartment with Kobe on the phone saying, I feel like God is calling us to move to Dallas. And he said, you can't hit a home run if you don't swing. And I think this is your home run. I grabbed those apartment papers, I brought them home, we filled them out, and 2 months later, we didn't tell anybody. We told my parents, we didn't tell anybody else. I think he told his mom the day before we left. We moved our entire life from Des Moines, Iowa, down to Dallas, Texas. And it was because I wrote at the top of this, what choices do I need to make so I am in a conducive environment to grow? I knew right away that the only way you change your environment and yourself, growth will be faster and more successful. There's a book called The Wild Goose Chase by Mark Batterson, and it talks about change of pace, change of pace, change of place, change of perspective. So you've got to change your environment to change your perspective. And I really quickly realized that I was never going to be able to outgrow all the stuff around me faster than it would keep pulling me back and keeping me small. Now, is that the same for everybody? Absolutely not. But for me in that season of life, I really truly needed to pick my life up and relocate myself like 5 states away. So that was the second book that shaped me. And y'all, I did not know that. Like, I knew I read that book in that season. I've recommended it a million times. I did not know that I read that very chapter 3 days before. So remember, I went down there. I was down there for a week. I brought these papers home. I sent the paperwork in and I start reading book number 3, which is called Greater. And Greater is by Stephen Furtick. And it's all about dream bigger, start smaller, and ignite God's vision for your life. In that time, in those 2 months that I came back, 2 or 3 months that I was back, I also I had a brick and mortar with some friends that we ran our small businesses out of this. There was like 10 rooms, and so we would share the rooms of this brick and mortar in Des Moines. And I did a book study, like a book study, Bible study with them every single week over this. And this book, I feel like it was just so perfect. Because this book is all about, the book is about Elijah, Elisha, that whole story in the Bible. If you don't know it, you can, I'm sure you can ask chat to summarize it for you. But the bottom line is the entire premise of the book is about burning the plows, right? And so he had been called by God to go be a prophet, and he was a farmer. So he literally killed his oxen, ate them for dinner, and he threw his plows in the fire and he burned them. So he, it's like burning the ships, right? Like there's a story about burning the ships so that way you can't turn around and go back, like you have to stay. And it says this whole book is about that. It is about burning the plows and never looking back, giving you greater clarity, greater purpose, greater joy, greater blessing, greater influence, greater impact. The sacrifice of burning plows is great, but the rewards you experience on the other side of the obedience is so much better. And this book just reminded me every single day as I read it before I left, that it was an act of obedience, that I shouldn't doubt myself, I shouldn't question it, that I knew it, and that I needed to stick with it. And y'all, there are so many people in my life that thought I was absolutely insane for what I did. I moved with a card table and an air mattress only. I actually moved several months before Kobe did. And so my mindset coach that I had hired already, she encouraged me that if I could, she's like, if you can handle it, don't bring any of your furniture. Just move with you, yourself, and I, so you don't bring any of that old, stuck, stagnant, what is happening? I'm not going anywhere with my life energy with me, and just make a decision that when you arrive in that city, that you are going to be the new best version of yourself. And y'all, that is exactly what I did. I literally moved with a card table and an air mattress, and I lived on that for several months until Kobe came. And even when he came, I think he brought a drawer, like a dresser to put his clothes in. But other than that, we bought everything else brand new slowly. And the rule was I was only allowed to buy new things with the profits from my business, which was really good because that's all I moved there with. I moved there with no customers, no clients, nobody that was on my current team that lived down there. And I knew one person who lived about 2 hours away. I moved to the Dallas side and she lived over on that Fort Worth side. And so, yeah, that's what I did. And what I can tell y'all is within 9 months, I did quadruple my business from doing that. And I think there were a lot of things that went into that. I hired a lot more help. But more than anything, I just made that decision that I was going to step into that best person as the best version of myself, and that I didn't move 1,000 miles away from everybody that I loved to play small. But that I was doing that. I was doing just exactly what that book Greater said, that I was chasing that greater plan for my life. So when I moved there, I had immediate well, that's not true. For the first 2 months, I was just trying to figure out where the Target and the Walmart was and where people buy groceries in a different state. And so once I figured that out and I got a new assistant hired that would be able to help me and come in my home, and she did about 10 to 15 hours a week. Her name was Shayla, and she was the best thing that ever happened to me. Anytime I go to hire help now, I always think back to Shayla and how the best thing that I can do is always delegate more, because I remember what Shayla did for my life and how much she empowered me, right? And she allowed me to buy back my time. And so I honestly can't tell you the books that I read in those first couple of years, because I probably listened to most of them on Audible. I moved up very quickly in my career, and yeah, they're probably all on Audible, so I don't remember them because they were on the road. But what I will tell you is then when I hit that next huge bump, because I'd grown a lot, right? I'd been working with this coach for years. I'd read stacks on books. I had all of the information. I'd been in this deep learning era, and then I went into a high doing, achieving era. So then I think the books started piling up again because I hit my next bump. I hit that next place where I really had to dive in deep, and I had to do a lot of work to be able to get to the next place. And that brings in book number 4. Book number 4 is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown, of which I have basically read every single one of her books. And this is the book that really helped me step into my power. At this point, I was having a really tough time with my mentor in my job. And it's just that I've talked about this before on here. I had a really, really tough time because I am a very strong, dynamic, charismatic person who is very sure of herself. Self-assurance is high. Came out of the womb with level 10 confidence. And when I'm doing great, I know I'm doing great and I own it well. And I think a lot of people I know a lot of people in my lifetime have always really struggled with that level of innate confidence that I have. But I can also tell you any of the places that I suck. Like I've got no problem doing that. But people who have deep rooted insecurity have always really struggled. So it was creating this huge, massive mess for me in my career. And it was making me constantly doubt my worthiness. It was big time triggering back up that little 10-year-old girl who'd been extremely bullied because it was this experience where I was being bullied as an adult. And so when I read this book, when I read Gifts of Imperfection, it's actually insane to realize the timing when I go back now and I flip through this book and I read the timing of when I read it and realize that I read this book and then the very next month overnight I I don't even know how to say what I did to my business, honestly, overnight. Like double, triple, quadrupled. I was already at a really high place. So when you're at a high place and you can double and triple your numbers, you are absolutely going insane. Brene Brown, her entire thing, she researches shame, right? So researches shame and about why we experience it, why we feel loneliness, all of those things. And so this book really helped me to embrace my brilliance. It is also one of those books that as I was reading it, I used to run like 3, 5, 8, 10 miles a day. And I would listen to this book as I was running. So I was reading it in my quiet time and re-listening to it as I was running. And I don't even know, y'all. If you struggle at all with cultivating authenticity and you have deep-rooted shame about who you are, whether you're worthy or not, this is just one of those books that I feel it's a tiny little powerful sucker. This is one of those books that I highly recommend that you read. But when I did it, it just helped me realize that I needed to let go of who everyone needed me to be to make them comfortable. And I really needed to step into who I was designed to be because there were people waiting for me to be that person. So I did do that. And you know what I can tell you about that is the flip side of that is how much I own my power actually ended up making my work environment worse. Because I owned more of my power overnight, I started achieving insanity. And for a lot of people in my life, it just made me more threatening. And so I went into this place where I tried to work harder and faster than the opinions and the criticism of other people could come. And that, is about 18 months later. I can tell you from that book to this next book, book number 5, it was about 18 months later that I was on a plane flying to Arizona, actually. And it was fall 2016. I remember sitting on the plane. I was in the aisle seat. I was on a Southwest plane. I remember the dude sitting next to me. He was going to some dental convention because he asked me about like, what book are you reading? And I can tell y'all that I did not make it past page 31 of this book. It's called H3 Leadership. Be humble, stay hungry, and always hustle. And it's by Brad Lomenick. And you open the front page and say, I had just bought the book and I'm sitting on the plane with it in front of me. The dental guy and I already talked, and I decided to open it up and start reading. And I was flying to Arizona to work with some of my team members that I was in the leadership position to work with to help them grow their business out here in Arizona. And I opened the book and I am exhausted at this point, and I'd started to hit a deep level of frustration. And it had been probably a week before where it was one of those moments where I'd gone to an appointment and it was terrible. Y'all, I'm not even kidding. Let me be really real. I went to an appointment to share the skincare products that I was selling at the time. And I get my rear wheel drive pink Cadillac stuck in their front yard. And that was after when I was trying to back out in their muddy front yard. I was trying to back out. That was after I was inside the house and I could actually see the outside from the inside of the house because there were walls in the side of this single wide trailer. And I get in my car and it gets stuck. And so I have to like floor it out. And I'm like literally have to hit the gas so hard, fly backwards. It flips me out on I-35 right outside Waxahachie, Texas. And I remember driving back into the city and I could see the Reunion Tower with the ball on top. And I was just bawling because I was so frustrated. I've been working so hard. And I would just kept coming up against more opposition and more criticism. And I just cried out, truly out loud. Just cried to God that day and just said, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. But nothing is working. And I had to leave that appointment and I had to drive clear across the city in traffic. And I had to meet another person that I was mentoring at a restaurant to do a networking event. And I cried the whole way. And I showed up and I just looked at her and I told her, I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I absolutely can't do this today. And as her leader, I just said that to her. I was just really honest about like, like I love you and I'm so sorry and this is not good leadership. But worse leadership would be me staying because I am not in a good spot and I really need to go home. And she was wonderful. Not only was she, she was on my team, I mentored her, but we were in church together and she was a dear friend. Her family's dear friends. And her name's Kat. She's so wonderful. And she, of course, like hugged me and she prayed for me and sent me home. And so this was a few days after that I'd gotten on this plane and I found this book in the airport and didn't think anything of it. And I sat down and it said, there comes a moment in the life of every leader when he or she stands at a crossroads and must ask, what's next? This moment came for me in October 2013 when I realized I was personally, professionally, physically, and spiritually burned out. The fire of my passion had been red hot for years. Our team had grown. Tens of thousands were participating in our events across the country, and we were making preparations for our first international gathering. Yet each morning that I walked into the office, I felt I had less to give than the day before. Less energy, less creativity, less passion, and less patience. I was running on fumes. With no filling station in view, my leadership was stale, and those closest to me were suffering as a result. I needed a break. That is basically as far as I got in that book. I had already signed up to be a part of John Townsend's leadership program. What I didn't know at the time was I thought I was signing up to be a part of this really cool leadership program where I would be learning all of these new skills, these coaching skills. I thought it was going to help me advance in my career and hit that next promotion that I was going for. But what it really was a friend who was a part of it had said she thought it would be very beneficial for me. And what I didn't know at that time was that she saw this in me. She saw in me that I needed a break. But I couldn't even recognize in myself that I needed a break. I didn't see the burnout in myself. All I knew is that I was frustrated and that I was tired and that my brains were basically on the floor from beating my head against the wall, trying to be everything that I needed to be, to be good enough for this person that was in my way of the advancement of my career. And when I read that book, I read that front page. Again, y'all, it's all I read in this whole book. I think I read a few more because I was on the plane and it was a 3-hour flight. But I never picked it up again because that was it. And that's why I want to tell you that that rule about uh, number one rule for reading is that you do not need to finish a book, uh, because this book made me realize that I would never be able to achieve my way to acceptance, but also that I was burnt out and I didn't know how bad it was, and that it would be years before I would really go after a goal again, but that it would never, ever look the same. So what was next? Y'all, I will just kind of summarize the next few years. I went into that leadership program, and so basically every single book that John Townsend and Henry Cloud wrote, if they had a book, I read it. Here's just a couple of my favorite ones that stick out when I think about it. And these books, these books don't look as loved. But the only reason that they don't look as loved, they are as loved. The only reason they don't look as loved is because I experienced these books. I was in the leadership program for it, and so we would show up every month. There was training, there were packets, there was one-on-one coaching, and video trainings, and so I feel like I experienced them just a little bit differently than just reading the book. So through that program, I want to tell you all just my top books that I read in that era and what they were and why they were. The first one is the book People Fuel. And the book People Fuel, the reason that one is one of my favorite ones that Dr. John Townsend wrote, that book actually came out during my second year that I was in the program. And it was such a beautiful, fun book because we were a part of the content as he was writing this book, and we were working through this program that then became the foundation of this book. And the People Feel book is the one that talks about the 22 relational needs of humans. And anybody that is in my life that has been mentored by me, coached by me, interacted with me at all has heard about this book, because this is the book that listed one of the 22 needs of humans is containment. Containment is a fancy word for venting. And so this really quickly became a very popular book for me. Anytime I do a retreat, I always make sure that people have this book have read this book, and that they have the chart that goes along with this, and that talks about the 22 relational needs of humans. And half of them are grace-based, half of them are truth-based. And what I love about that is because there are times in our life where we just need grace. And they talk about these different needs where it's like they're grace-based needs where we just need somebody to show up for us and hold us. And then there are truth-based needs. Like containment would be a grace-based need. Like, I just need you to hold space for me so I can lose it. Don't try and fix me. Please don't give me advice. Where you have the other more truth-based needs where it's like you do want advice. You do want someone to collaborate with you and help you have ideas. So that is my favorite book for that. I think that in a marriage, I think that in a family, in a workplace, I think this book would serve anyone well. The next book that really helped me out in that era was the book Safe People and How to Avoid Those That Aren't. This is another book that Dr. Henry and Dr. John wrote together. Again, you guys, Dr. John Townsend and Dr. Henry Cloud, they're best friends who are clinical Christian psychologists, and they are the ones who wrote the book Boundaries. So like 40 years ago, they were the fathers of the book Boundaries, and they have written a bazillion books since then. The reason Safe People was really big was because I was going through this deep purging era where I was losing a lot of people in my life left and right. And I was having a hard time realizing that God was very much like Amazon removed from carting them from my life because they were not safe, supportive people. And this book helped me know how to find relationships that are good for me and that do serve me well. And also helped me just to realize that I guess I was a little bit raised that I needed to be friends with people, even if they were harmful for me, because they needed to be shown how to have a good friend. Like, there was this relationship at this time where she was a terrible friend. Kobe absolutely hated her, hated being around her. And I was like, I think she's trying her best. And my mom would be like, I think she just doesn't know how to be a good friend. And Kobe would be like, no, she actually doesn't know how to be a good person. She has really, really bad character. And I'm like, I think it's just how she was raised. Like, she doesn't know any better. And my mom's like, yeah, you got to give her the benefit of the doubt. And then, honestly, it was like a ginormous, like, backstabbing situation. It was bad. I was devastated for years. And this book was part of helping me realize that I stayed devastated way after reading the book because, as an Enneagram 8, you don't go, oh, they're wrong. You go, I'm wrong. How did I miss this? Like, how did I not see that this person was going to, rip my heart out of my chest and stomp all over it and then like take out a banner in the city about it? And so that was hard, but this book did help me know how to then choose better friends moving forward. And even still, sometimes I'll catch myself and remind myself, no one you never bring negative people up. You never bring basement people up. Basement people only bring you down. So if you think like, oh, I should keep this person in my life because I can be a great influence on them, I can be helpful, they need a good friend, they need a good influence, they just need somebody to be there for them. That's actually a no. No. Remove from cart. Okay, next, moving on. The great next book that I learned in that same era is How to Have Difficult Conversations. Again, John and Henry wrote this book. We studied this out of the 24 months that I was in that program and the 50 flights that I took to be able to be a part of the program. I was living in Dallas, so I'd fly to Arizona every month for 1 to 3 days and study this material. There was 8 of us in the program together, and we would go through work presentations. We would go through, there was this room called the crying room. I lovingly called it the crying room. And we would sit in there and we would really process things, deep emotions that we were going through. It was the best rehab for leaders experience I've ever had in my life. And I would do it again and again and again and again, and then again, and then one more time. Highly recommend the John Townsend Leadership Program. So this book, How to Have Difficult Conversations, was about 2 of those 24 months. I feel like we spent covering a lot of this material, and it's just gaining the skills for honest and meaningful communication. I notice if there's one thing that I could say most people suck at, most people suck. The thing that most people suck at that it would serve them really well in their life to get better at. How about that? Would be how to have a difficult conversation, because there is telling somebody why something isn't working with them, and then there is proactively telling someone why something isn't working. And there's literally a framework to having a difficult conversation with someone to let them know this thing that you're doing right now is not working. This is why it isn't working. Here are 3 examples of when you have done this and that it is not working. And this is what we need to do moving forward. And if that doesn't change, these are going to be the consequences. So it is being very clear, very upfront, and is removing the emotion from it. I think that's a place that we struggle. I think we struggle to remove the emotion from it. We struggle to remove our own experience from it. And we struggle to just focus on the details that are going to be best to move the situation with this person forward. So if you are a human with oxygen in your lungs, you should read How to Have That Difficult Conversation by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Don't go get the book by anybody else, specifically by John and Henry. How to Have That Difficult Conversation. If you've not read it, you should. Another book was Changes That Heal. Yet another great book by them that we read in this season. A lot of their content, the foundation of their content, was really from Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Changes That Heal. And it was a lot about like bonding and boundaries, like how we bond, how we create relationships, the boundaries that we have in relationships. And this one was This one was really tough for me because this one is about learning to hold the good and the bad of everyone in your life. And I specifically remember they were really hard on me about my dad in this situation. There's always a hero parent and there's always a villain parent. My dad was the hero parent because he was really gone working all the time. My mom was the villain parent because she was the parent that was really around, especially the one that I was around. My dad was like out on the farm doing the farm things, and I was really in my mom's office, like helping her run her business all of my childhood. And so obviously, mom's the villain parent, dad is the hero parent. And it was through the framework of this book that they were like, nah, man, like that's not how that works. Like your mom can't be all bad and your dad can't be all good. And this book and the framework with the people in the program through this book taught me how to hold the good and the bad of everyone and every situation and to honestly be really objective about it. I guess the more I talk about it, the more this book was probably the framework. Having to study this book in this program was probably the framework of what has made me a really, really great coach. Kobe was complimenting me on this yesterday randomly. He was like, Kobe was getting ready to make a decision about something and his brain was kind of spiraling, and he knew that I was going to be stopping by the school to watch the game. And he said, I said to myself, oh my gosh, why am I even getting anxious about this? Why am I even thinking about this? I don't need to. Chelsea's coming in a minute. This is her thing. She's literally a clarity coach. She's going to help me know right away what the best situation is for this. And he goes, you're just really, really good at holding all of the facts and looking at them from this unbiased place. But I think that came from this book. It came from this book of me going, this is the good and this is the bad. That doesn't make you good and that doesn't make you bad. It just is what it is. And looking at holding the good and the bad of everything and everyone, how do we move forward from there? And so I think Changes That Heal, that book was the framework of what really made me move into my very best coaching era. Uh, and I I led hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women before I went through that program. So they can tell you I was not always very awesome. The last book that I'm going to tell you all about that I read in that program and that we will end with today. This is a part 2 series. I knew that it would be. And this is just scratching the surface of the books I've read. But the last one I'm going to end with today that we also studied in that program, this one's by Dr. Henry Cloud, and it's called Necessary Endings. Necessary Endings. The employees, businesses, and relationships that all of us have to give up in order to move forward. And I read I started reading this book actually 2 months minus 3 days before that really challenging friendship that ended. And even though I was reading that book, and I knew that God was removing this person from my life for my good, because everyone said that I should, and I just kept refusing. And I did have a friend, Allison, that said, as somebody who was bullied as bad and as long as you were, you know what it's like to not have a friend, and I think that's why you keep keeping this not good for you person as your friend. And so everybody in my life was calling it out. But this book, Necessary Endings, is really all about helping us understand that the only way for a rose bush to grow into all it's intended to be is for us to prune it, right? We have to prune trees, we prune flowers, and just like we prune plants, we have to prune our life, right? Like we've got to prune back things in our life, whether it's parts of our job, places we're volunteering, people in our life. We have to do that in order to be able to grow. And so this book will help you look at your relationships, your businesses, employees, and all of the things in your life that you need to prune to be able to grow and to be able to move forward. So, all right, y'all, there we are. We are 50% of the way done with this book stack of when I sat in my brain and went through the core books that shaped me. So, again, y'all, if you are interested in getting help with a little bit of grounding, help with a little bit of clarity, maybe you need some job change advice, maybe you've got some decision fatigue going on, maybe you're not quite sure what you're supposed to do in this next season. Um, I every day help people from just decisions and pivots that they need to make in their careers, that they need to make in their businesses, their lives. Sometimes it's simple as what kind of a framework is going to help me get to where I want to go with when am I waking up and when am I working out and when am I getting my groceries? Because I think that sometimes when we're in the weeds with life, it's really hard to be able to create the structure that we need to create so we can most successfully move forward, the necessary endings that we need to have so we can really prune and we can really grow. Um, and so, or maybe it's just the next best book for you. Maybe you want to book an intro clarity call so we can talk about what the very best next best book is for you to read. Right now, my sister-in-law, the Enneagram 4, that's how most of y'all know her. She is reading a series of books that we discussed that would be the best books for her to read in this current season. We discussed those when she was here about a month and a half ago, and it's been really beautiful to watch her grow uh, through reading those books and through experiencing those books. So it's something I love doing. Book an intro clarity call, 30 minutes, you and me. We can talk about your job, we can talk about your decision fatigue, we can talk about your life, or we can talk about the next book that's best for you. But I would love to be able to hold that space for you to help you find a little bit of clarity because, y'all, life is too short and meant to be too sweet to spend that much time confused. So I will see you next week where we will tackle the other stack of books that shaped me. Until next time, all things excellence fam. Thanks for joining.